Welcome to the Purposely Aligned Entrepreneur Podcast presented by Boss Girl Creative. This is episode number 480. Today, I'm talking about how to price for profits. Now let's dive in. Hey, I'm Taylor Bradford, host of the Purposely Aligned Entrepreneur Podcast presented by Boss Girl Creative. I help small business owners turn their purpose into a paycheck, and it starts with visibility. In the online world, visibility equates to sales. So if you're dreaming of being the next $1 million entrepreneur, you've come to the right place because weekly I share visibility tips, brand advice, and business resources. So grab a notebook, your favorite pen, and a beverage, and let's do the work. Hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Bradford. Thank you so much for being here. Today, I will be talking about how to price for profits. Before we get there, let's find out what's been going on in the land of social media. Social media headline number 1, Meta expands profile connections for the business suite. There will be an easier way to manage multiple business pages via different accounts. Social media headline number 2, TikTok is testing Amber Alerts in user feeds. The initiative aims to help raise awareness of missing persons. Social media headline number 3, TikTok files another motion to oppose the U.S. sell-off bill. TikTok's arguing that the bill lacks evidence to support what it sees as a ban. Social media headline number 4, Instagram chief flags coming changes to profile grid displays. Instagram's moving to a more rectangular main profile grid. Social media headline number 5, X enables long-form post creation via third-party apps. There are now new options for posting to X. Social media headline number 6, X faces bans in both Brazil and Venezuela amid ongoing disputes. More challenges for Elon Musk's X project. And that wraps up this week's social media headlines. So I'm curious if you are running your business with a CRM, a client relationship management tool or software. Because let me tell you, having one, especially if you deal with clients routinely, having one is a game changer, a time saver. It is soul giving because it allows you to do a lot of things in one software versus a bunch of other softwares doing one single task for you. Why not pick something that can do a multitude of tasks for you? And that's where Dubsado comes in. I personally have been using Dubsado for over 5 years. And let me tell you, when I got myself into Dubsado and created what I needed to create. So it's contracts for me, it's invoicing for me, it's scheduling for me, it's workflows for me. Like legitimately, it saved me so much time in my Sugar Creek business. It just mind blowing. If you need a software like that, I want you to try out Dubsado. For my listeners, Dubsado is offering 20% off your first month or your first year of service. Go to bossgirlcreative.com/Dubsado to take advantage. So I'm back from Colorado, and Texas slapped me in the face when I came into the Panhandle with 107 all the way up to 109 degrees on my trek back home. And I just really wanted to turn back around and go back to Colorado, to be honest. And I totally understand why a lot of Texans escape, especially to Colorado, because it's not that far to get there. Although you are still driving through Texas, which is more than halfway to get to Colorado. Like we got to Amarillo on the drive out there and we'd already been driving 8 hours and we still weren't in Colorado or out of Texas. So yes, Texas is a very large state. But yes, coming back, I totally understand. If I didn't have my closing on my real estate that we are purchasing, which We are officially landowners. And if we didn't have that land closing, we would have stayed longer. However, I do have a humongo event coming up this weekend. So we would have had to be back for that anyway. But it's like, now we're like planning, when can we go back? Except we can't really go back because now we have a house to build. So, and all the things that go along with that. And all the fees that go along with that. Ooh. Anyways, welcome to my world. If you're not following, I have been doing a almost daily, depends on how exciting my day is, whether or not I create a full reel, but I've been doing basically a Dear Diary reel over on my personal Instagram, Taylor L. Bradford. And I did start a TikTok of the same name, and I've been posting those over there as well. So you can follow me on either one. And I have been sharing them over on Instagram through the Boss Girl channel on Instagram, just kind of as a behind the scenes, especially if it's related to Boss Girl. And which, by the way, I do have a freebie for you, a brand new freebie. It is a content planner. So if you're needing a way to plan out your content, I'm going to encourage you to grab the planner. Go to bossgirlcreative.com/content planner, and it will hook you up with that. And I do have in the instructions of the planner, I do have links to the reels and a carousel post on how to actually go out to Google and figure out what are people asking, which will help you plan content. And you can legitimately plan for a full year of content if you're posting once a day, 5 days a week, or you can just continue to do your research and you could have a full year's of content created for you and planned out for you just simply using Google and what people are asking related to your niche, related to the things that are important to your niche. So all the instructions are in the content planner. Go to bossgirlcreative.com/content planner to get that freebie. So that's been some of my behind the scenes in those personal reels, which you can go take a peek at over at the Taylor L. Bradford Instagram. But all that to say, we're talking about pricing for profit today because I feel like this is kind of a taboo to talk about pricing for profit. It's taboo to really think about pricing as a creative just because it is like we have so much passion and so much energy and so much drive to do the thing that we love to do. We put a lot of emotion behind what we love to do that talking about pricing is really hard. On the way back from Colorado, my husband and I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and they talk about knowing your numbers. And ultimately in business, you have to know your numbers. You have to know where you're spending money and where you're spending time in order for you to be successful, in order for you to be profitable. Success truly does come down to numbers. Yes, you could book 100 clients in a year and you could label that as success, but honestly, is it profitable for you to be working with 100 clients in a year? It may be a yes, it may be a no, but it does come down to your numbers. And I know as creatives, talking about numbers is hard. It's not easy because we are driven by a different part of our brain. And so that's what this is all about. And there is a freebie attached to this episode. It is a pricing for profit freebie. So I want you to go to bossgirlcreative.com/pricing profit. So ignore the 4. So pricing profit. And that will get you this episode's download. And it will help you crunch your numbers. It will help you figure out, are you profitable right now? And what do you need to do to become profitable? And I've talked about this for a long time. I'm not a natural salesperson, in the sense of I have sales training. Yes, I've invested in sales training personally, and I have done a lot of research on the topic, and I am comfortable with selling in my own way, but I am not a door knocker. in our roofing business, we have to send our sales team out to knock on doors in order to generate business. Like that's just part of how you are first starting out. And then once you get referrals, then you don't have to go out and do a whole lot of knocking, but that's where you start, is door knocking. And I hate door knocking. Like I've gone out with my husband and it just makes me cringe and it's not comfortable. And so when you're not comfortable, you do have to like look internally to see, why is that not making you comfortable? What's so hard about this? What's so scary about this? Where do you like need some help? Where do you need some work? Like what will make this easier? And obviously repetition makes this easier, but I do know that it's uncomfortable. And so I choose not to do it, but I choose to do other things to overcome that. And thankfully with Sugar Creek, I don't have to door knock. Like I have a beautiful website. I'm running Google ads. Like my Google ads are kind of like door knocking, but they're not intrusive. Like I feel door knocking is kind of intrusive. And there are people that have personalities that can like just light up when they door knock, but that's not me. It is not me. Like my Enneagram 1, and I don't like confrontation, and door knocking is a lot of confrontation. Whether it's positive or negative, it's still confrontation, right? So I have to set myself up in a different way so that I am comfortable. But sometimes you do have to, like networking. I don't really like networking. It makes me uncomfortable, but I know in order for people to know who I am in Sugar Creek that I do have to go out and network. So it's kind of like networking is my door knocking of the roofing business. We have to do hard things. If we want to be legit business owners, we do have to do hard things. And I think that we don't often drive our businesses through like the number crunching aspects, like the analytical aspects, the data-driven facts of our businesses, especially when you classify yourself as a creative. So this is why it's important that you know your numbers. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you haven't read that book, it's fantastic. It is a lesson in numbers, knowing, how your income is coming in, where your expenses are. Are you driving back into your asset sheet, or are you driving out your liabilities? Like what is driving you? Is it your liabilities or is it your assets? And it really is all about building your assets. And that would be with real estate or investments or rental property or bonds or stocks or whatever. Growing an asset sheet. That's what that book is all about. Highly recommended if you haven't taken a peek at that book or listened to that book or read that book. It is data driven. It has to be. And I think that that's one thing that we as creatives struggle with, because we just want to do the thing we love so much to do because we're driven by passion. But sometimes that can set us up to fail because we aren't comfortable with numbers, or we aren't comfortable talking about numbers. And I think that that's very important. So that is what we're going to talk about. Again, grab the freebie, bossgirlcreative.com/pricing profit. And that will lead you in the direction to take advantage of the freebie for this particular episode. So the first question I'm going to ask you, are you currently planning for profits in your business? If you've been doing this for any length of time, I really hope that you are taking into consideration your profit already. But you may not be. You may be willy-nilly, which a lot of times is kind of the direction people go. They look at their competitors and see what their competitors are charging and then slot themselves in to fit in. And while there is merit behind knowing what your competition is charging, it doesn't take into consideration what you should be charging based on what your expenses are, what your costs are, and what your time is worth. Because you don't know what that person has built into their pricing. So I do know, like in my markets for Sugar Creek specifically, I know where my limit is for buying inventory. Like I try really hard to spend money when I'm investing in new inventory so that I get my money back out within 1 to 3 rental cycles. And so that's kind of my framework for where I need to be when I am out buying new inventory. Now, if it's big inventory like chairs, obviously it may take me a little bit longer to get my money back with such a large investment. And then also like my leather furniture will take me some more times to rent to get my money back out of those things. But in general, I know, and it was important to me from the very beginning, that I make an investment that I can get my money back out within 1 to 3 rentals. Now, when I look at my competitors' pricing, I'm just seeing their number. And while it is smart to kind of be in line with numbers, just so that you know where you are in your market, specifically for rentals, let me just put that caveat out there. Rentals are a commodity. It is something that is literally comparable across the board. It's kind of like groceries, right? But we're service driven. Sugar Creek is service driven, as are most specialty rental companies. We are doing more than just rentals for you, even though we are selling you a commodity or renting you a commodity. And so there is some merit to knowing what your competitors are charging just from that standpoint. Now, again, that does not take into consideration any expenses whatsoever or any overhead, but it's nice to know what your competitors are charging for a similar item in their inventory, just so you can see what the market is bearing. Now, again, it does not take into consideration any expenses or what makes you different in your offering. So that is a caveat. And I don't think that that's replicatable across every industry, but I do want you to know that I'm not intending for you to go out and check your competitors and fall in line. It's nice to know what they're charging, but I need you to price for your own profit, your own time. So, are you currently planning for profits in your business? Now, we're going to talk about how to price for profits, and we're going to talk about how to lose the stress, to basically step away from the emotion that is attached as a creative for pricing, or kind of like our mindset on how we go about pricing. Because I think at the end of the day, we forget that we are worthy to charge a certain rate. And if you have a full-time job and let's say you're making $50,000 a year and you want to eventually make that in your business so that you can quit your day job, then you do really have to know your numbers in order where you need to be in order to make that same $50,000, thinking about if you have benefits and time off and those kinds of things, where you need to come in your business in order to step away from the 9 to 5. So I think when you start thinking about it from that standpoint, that it kind of helps you take away that stress that comes with being a creative of talking about numbers. Being a creative, listen, these parts are not easy. It's not easy to create or set pricing because we are so passionate about what it is that we're doing. But I want you to know that it is possible to set that creative hat aside and to work on the analytical side of your brain so that you are making money, because you have a hobby if you're not. And it's okay to have a hobby as long as you have a full-time income with something else and you don't have ambition or drive to make a hobby into a business. Totally fine with that. I started looking into potentially making jewelry for myself out of vintage items. And I was like, oh, wow, the cost benefit of me learning how to do that. I'm not in a place right now to do that. Maybe I do that in 20 years. And I've also watched another maker. She's making beautiful bags with leather elements and old quilts. And I'm talking she has honed her craft. She is creating beautiful things. She's also making jackets. And I'm like, I inherited my great-great-grandmother's quilts. I have probably 40 quilts. And I want to do them a service. I don't want them to just sit in a closet. And so I am exploring that, but I don't have the time to learn how to do that right now. And it would definitely be a hobby at this point. Would I love to be able to get to her craft level? Absolutely. But another place, another time. But it does kind of fuel my creative brain to learn a new trade that I could potentially put some money behind and make some money from. So I think creatives, I think we are constantly learning how to hone our crafts and how to put ourselves into other places to continue to hone our crafts, but we don't always think about money. We don't always think about pricing or talking about numbers. And I'm hoping this gives you the confidence that you need to do this hard work, because it's not easy, it's not fun, but it is something we must do. Because when you are confident in your numbers, it becomes easier to say, these are my rates. This is what I charge. No, I don't offer discounts. And if this isn't the right fit for you, no big deal, because it will be the right fit for someone else. So I want you to find that confidence in order for that to get super easy to just come out your mouth. And I know this will not happen overnight. It will take time, but once you have an understanding of the why behind your numbers, the nitty-gritty of the numbers themselves, it will get easier. So, like I said with Sugar Creek, I wanted to make sure that when I made an investment in inventory, 1 to 3 rental cycles in order to get my money out. But I have to also think about my time in searching for those things, although I do kind of just still classify that as fun, unless I'm searching specifically for a client project. And then it's not necessarily fun. There is stress involved. But for the most part, bringing inventory into my business is fun. It's part of the creative part of that. And I don't forget that part. And I also probably don't, to be frank, I don't calculate that as part of my non-working hour time in my business. And there is a difference, right? There's time in the service or in the offering, but there's time also that is still working in your business, kind of like being the CEO of your business or just doing the busy tasks. I want you to make sure you're tracking that too. So there's time in the service and time outside of the service, but you're still doing business tasks. And I don't want you to forget about those things. Now, I conveniently forget about those things related to when I'm in Round Top shopping for new inventory, or I'm in an antique store. Chad and I went into an antique store yesterday just to look around. I wasn't really looking to buy anything, so that was more of a fun trip, but there are times when I am specifically out looking for things, or I say, okay, I'm going to go antiquing today, I'm going to go thrifting today, and I should be counting that time, but I don't because I enjoy it, so I put it in a different category. But when I'm moving inventory around in the warehouse, or we're getting reorganized, or I'm stocking our kit, those are hours of service towards my business. Those are the things that you need to think about. Now, for Smitty's, for our roofing and construction company, we use an estimating software for us to figure out where we need to be. And then there's profit built in for that. But also we make sure there is profit built in. So I am adding 40%. So when I figure out a number, let's say my sub says it's going to be $2,500 to paint the customer's house. And that is coming from my sub. I'm not using an estimating software. I'm sending my sub out for him to quote, and he's giving me a number where he needs to make profit. Then he's going to give it to me, and I'm going to add 40% on top of his number, and that's the number I communicate to my client, because I want to be at a 40% profit margin with all of our work. So we use an estimating software, but then also when they're one-off projects, we send our subs out, they tell us what their number is, and then we add a 40% markup to that, because we are ultimately still project managing the job, right? We're still communicating to the sub, scheduling the sub, making sure the sub gets their material, or if we have to finance the project, we need to take into consideration all of that. And then on top of that, we charge a $300 admin fee on every project. So that helps us pay for my bookkeeper. It helps me pay for my software. It helps me pay for my insurance. And then I charge a percentage when I increase a claim. So I charge 10% currently when I increase a claim. And then if we use any of Smitty's own materials, so like we buy nails in bulk, let's say my guys take out 2 boxes of nails to take to the job, I make sure to charge that back to the job so I get reimbursed for the material we are buying in bulk. So that's how we price it in Smitty's. I make sure we have a 40% markup. I use an estimating software that has profit built in. Plus, I add in a 10/10 GCO&P, that's general contractor overhead and profit, to make sure that I'm not missing out on any profit, because a lot of times when there are different trades involved in our estimating software, it is estimating that subcontractor's profit and not my profit. So I make sure that I go back in and put a 10/10 on top. And it does roughly equate back out to a 40% markup, which is exactly what I need to be when I am doing a project. So when you get to a point when someone finally says, I will pay you to do something that excites you, that lights you up, that's pretty freaking awesome, like that is everything to a creative, right? But I don't want you to put yourself in the negative right out of the gate. Like if you have a day job that you can help finance your hobby until you can turn it into a business till it's part-time and then full-time, that's where I want you to be mentally. I don't want you to come out of the gate swinging in a lot of debt, because it is true that businesses don't survive when there is a lot of debt right out of the gate, because it's too hard to overcome. And if this is how you're putting food on your table, it is like beyond hard to overcome to make a profit and to pay everybody else. And one thing that is very prominent in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the mentality of paying yourself first. And I know that Mike Michalowicz has a book called Profit First, and he does encourage you to pay yourself first as well. I do think that there is strong strategy in that paying yourself is important. And it should drive you in the sense that you now know what you have to do in order to pay your expenses, right? So you pay yourself first means you may have to work harder so you're not shortchanging how you pay your bills. But if you don't pay yourself first, if you pay your bills first, then you may skip paying yourself. And that should never be the mentality for us. We should pay ourselves first and then pay our expenses, and allow the drive to come from, okay, now I need to sell 5 more of those things. What can I do to sell 5 more of those things? Who can I go out and network? What ads can I turn on? Who can I send an email to? Who can I follow up with? Who can send me referrals? Whose door can I knock on, right? So I think that is a strong strategy, to pay yourself first and then pay, your bills, and allow that to drive you forward instead of being in the mindset of fear and necessity and scarcity. Put yourself in the mindset of passion and serving, and it will work out. But again, I don't want you to start your business in the red. It's not advisable, and it will cause you to operate from those places, and you won't overcome that. To operate from a place of fear and necessity and just you have to takes the fun out of what you're doing. And I don't want you to be that. Sugar Creek had legitimately no overhead when we started. It was out of garages. And then I put myself into storage, and my overhead was $375 a month for 2 storage rooms and $30 a month for my software. And that was it, because my hosting for the website was already accounted for with all the other things that I was doing. And so maybe I had $450 a month that I had to make in order to get into profitability. And because I already had the mindset of getting back my money with investing in my inventory, 1 to 3 rental cycles, I was already pulling a profit. And so I kept my overhead small for as long as I could in order to get to where I wanted. which was having a big warehouse, having a big showroom that allowed me to show my clients more of my inventory in a better fashion because they won't rent what they can't see. And so when I have clients come in to the Sugar Creek headquarters and they see all the things in person, they rent more. Like back then my average ticket was probably $800 an order. My average ticket now leans closer to $5,000 an order because they can see it. And I have proven my value. I have clout with what it is I do and what it is that I offer. Now people are finding me through hearing about me, but my Google ad is still working hard for me. I would say 90% still is coming from my Google ad that I run every single day. People are finding me on Google. So Sugar Creek started in a garage. I literally built 15 farm tables in my garage, y'all. I did not want any expenses that I didn't think were necessary. I was bootstrapping it all the way until I could afford to have a mortgage on a warehouse. Now, what's great about the mortgage on my warehouse is I also have RV storage. I also have a front tenant. I have Smitty's now operating out of my building. So I am making money through other means that helps when it might be a slow period for Sugar Creek. So I just want you to think about all of these things. So how do you plan for profit in your business? Again, I want you to grab the free guide because there are the hardcore number equations that you will need in order to figure all of this out. And you're going to do that by going to bossgirlcreative.com/pricing profit to get that freebie. So how do you plan for profit? How much money do you need to actually make? This will look different for every person. Some of us are full-time, some of us are part-time, some of us are paying for families, some of us are only doing this for fun money. I know that this will vary from person to person to person, but how much money do you need to make? I want you to look at your actual circumstance. What I need in order to survive or afford the things that I need or want. What does that look like for you? Everyone's income and circumstances and situations are going to look different. So you need to know what you need to make to pay your bills, not someone else's. And that's where this comes into knowing what your competitors are charging, but knowing what you need to make in order to survive. Number 2, you can't price your offerings emotionally. You can't be like, oh, I'll give that to you for $10. No big deal, even though it takes you 10 hours of time to do and 5 hours of offering dedicated time to keep your business going. Absolutely not. Do not price based off of emotion. You have to know your numbers. Number 3, know your expenses. What are your fixed expenses and what are your variable costs or expenses? Your fixed expenses per offering is going to be your supplies, your equipment costs, your web hosting, your insurance. It's part of every single project. It's part of every single offering. It's part of every time you show up and do the thing that you do. What are those fixed costs? The things that have to be paid every single month that are applicable to the offering that you provide. And then your variable costs are going to be based on the scope or the size of the project and may be different from client to client. For example, if I can't get somewhere in my truck and 28-foot trailer, I'm legitimately the length of a semi. If I can't get somewhere, I have to rent a U-Haul. I don't do Penske because it's not profitable for me. I get better rates through U-Haul. I've already done the research. So I have to now account for the U-Haul when I am costing out or legitimately writing a proposal for a client. How many team members have to be with me in order to accomplish what we have to do, get everything unloaded and set up for a client based on the time we have available. I have to know all of those things. So those are going to be variable. How far am I driving? When I went to San Antonio and I had to have overnights, I had to account for lodging, time out, per diem for my help. all of that. Those are variable costs. Your travel, equipment rentals, your labor, your packaging, like all of that differs than fixed expenses, things you know occur every single time for a service or offering. Write down each and every one of these expenses from start to finish for your offering. Include everything you can think of. And then categorize those expenses based on, is it a fixed expense or is it a variable expense? And this will help you find your break-even point. Don't forget your time. This is something that we as creatives do forget. Like I was talking about, when I'm out antiquing, I don't actually count that as my time because I really enjoy that, and it's kind of part of my self-care process. But I want you to think about the times you're, updating your website, or you are spending time working on a proposal, or you are building something, or you are photographing things. Think about all of that time that is part of like the cost of just you. That has to be figured in too. Think of it this way. If you had a 9 to 5 and your boss asked you to do all of the things that you actually do in your business, and you are getting either an hourly rate or what your salary comes down per hour of your time working for your boss, you've got to have that same mentality in your own business. So if you were to build that thing for your boss and you were making $50,000 a year and it came down to you being like in an 8-hour day, let's say that equates to $250 an hour. Are you charging $250 an hour of your time back to your client in some fashion? That's how you have to think about it. Okay, so now you know that. Now you know how to plan for profit. You're not going to offer discounts. You're not going to forget your own time, your working time versus your non-working time. You're going to know your numbers. And here's the thing. You do not have to be for everyone. You need to charge what you need to charge and determine what type of client you need to attract to get there. Popular doesn't pay the bills, profit does. And that is the important stickler of all of this. That's how you plan for profit. Not offering discounts unless that is just a part of one of your core values. Not forgetting your own time and how that factors in. Knowing your numbers, knowing you don't have to reach everyone, knowing you don't have to be for everyone, and knowing how much effort you have to put out in order to get back. Charge what you need to charge and determine what type of client you need to attract to do that. That's how you price for profit. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Again, grab that freebie, bossgirlcreative.com/pricing profit. Also, if you want that content plan, bossgirlcreative.com/content plan. Golly, 2 cool freebies in this episode. And then finally, again, shout out Dubsado, life-changing for me and Sugar Creek. And if you need a CRM or you want to explore having a CRM and how that can help you just like get more efficient, get more organized, I want you to take a look at them. Go to bossgirlcreative.com/Dubsado for that 20% off your first month or 20% off your first year. Thank you so much again for tuning in. And until next time, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Hey, real quick before I go, I wanted to pop back in and say again, thank you so much for listening to this latest episode of the Purposely Aligned Entrepreneur Podcast. I would so love a favor from you right now. Would you please share this episode with a friend or share it to your social media and tag me at Boss Girl Creative? Oh my gosh, that would mean so much to me if you did that right now. Okay, I'll see you next week with a brand new episode.